I said in the first lecture that I was going to try to provide you with a schema into which you could place the theorists that we're going to discuss, and it requires going down deep to do that, and there are presuppositions. My presupposition, and this is a psychoanalytic presupposition, it's predicated on a poetic tradition, I would say, on an ancient tradition. I learned most of it from reading Jung. It was Carl Jung that helped me understand that we're nested inside a dream, that we have to be, because we don't know everything. We have to take things as givens, and the things that we take as givens are nested inside stories, and we accept the stories as valid, and then outside the stories is the absolute unknown. You know, and that's partly, the stories are tricky, you know. One of the classic stories, it's a variant of the Jonah story, I would say, is St. George and the Dragon. And that story was represented during the Renaissance and during medieval times thousands and thousands of ways. It's like the story of St. Patrick who chased the snakes out of Ireland, same idea. And the typical St. George story is The Hobbit or Harry Potter. So in the second volume of Harry Potter, correct me if I have any of these details wrong, you remember there's that snake, the basilisk. So there's this magic castle, right? You guys have no problem with that. Magic castle, no problem. There's an orphan, he's an orphan, he goes to the magic castle to learn how to be more than normal, right? The muggles, he has a muggle family. We're not too happy with the muggle family. Like, as representatives of normal people, they have some lacks. Now, of course, the reason for that is that, well, that's what teenagers often feel about their parents, right? They feel, Jesus, these couldn't really be my parents. I must have some other parents who are like together. And those are like magical parents, right? Parents that live in the sky. And of course, Harry Potter has earthly parents, that's the muggles. And Dursley, I think, is the kid. He's a wonderful piece of work. And, you know, ill-formed, eh? Spoiled, ill-formed, selfish, very far from the ideal. He's a foil for Harry. And of course, he's appreciated and doted on, and Harry is actually punished for his virtues. Well, that's a classic story, right? To be punished for your virtues. I mean, if you look at the story, the central story in Christianity, the central story in Christianity is about someone who is precisely punished in the worst possible way for the highest possible virtues. And that's what it makes it an archetypal story, because there isn't anything more unfair than that. And so it's a limit, in a sense. It can't be worse than that. Being punished for being, you know, unworthy, it's like, yeah, well, at least makes sense. But to be punished because you have your act together and you're a good person, that's real punishment. And that's what happens to Harry. So luckily he finds out that he's magical, which is quite convenient, and off he goes to wizarding school. And you know, that's actually like going and studying the humanities. I mean, it was when they still were, you know, because it's through the humanities that you make contact with the magic of your culture, and that makes you more than merely the child of your parents, because you are more than merely the child of your parents. You're the child of nature, and you're the child of culture. And until you understand what that means, understand that you have two sets of parents, like the divine hero always has two sets of parents, you can't construe yourself properly as an individual. You're not situated properly in the world. You don't know what your responsibilities are. You can't orient your values properly, and you will suffer for that. Because, as far as I can tell, because life is so difficult, you have to do something that's truly worthwhile in order to justify it. And so, well, and that's what all these stories tell you. That's what the story of Jonah is telling you. It's like you have an ethical duty to straighten things up, and if you don't do it, you're going to be sorry. And that story is echoed everywhere. Well, now St. George, well, let's go to Harry Potter. That's what we were talking about. So he goes off to the magic castle, and he's learning to be a wizard. And he's kind of an interesting character, because he's not really good. And we find out, I think that's because, doesn't he have a piece of Voldemort in him? Isn't that what happens? Yeah. And that's what that means, is that to be good, truly good, you can't just follow rules. That's very clear in the Harry Potter story. And you also have to be able to understand malevolence. And in order to understand malevolence so that you can withstand it, you have to understand that part of you that's malevolent. Because if you don't, you're naive. And if you're naive, you're easy pickings.